good you're here. I'm so happy you've decided to get serious about taking your dream business to the next level using funding. No more business loans, no more using your emergency funds, no more confusion on where to start, where to get support, and what to do if and when you get stuck. My name is Sloan. Welcome to the Nothing for Granted podcast. I'm a funding expert, a beauty academy owner, and a homeschooling mom of 4. This is the place to be, to learn tips to get your dream business funded. You're going to learn tactful research and grant writing tips so you can use them while applying to grants. Because I too am a busy visionary CEO / mama / a million other hats, I'm sharing with you my top kingdom entrepreneurship tips. You're going to get answers to questions like, how do I infuse God into my business? How do you juggle all of the things without resenting your work? And how do you market yourself as a freelancer or solopreneur so that you can increase your impact? When you're building something that's never been built before, you need someone that's going to be that tough love friend. You need someone that's going to hold you accountable to the vision that is uniquely yours. Everything, hear me on this, everything that you have experienced has led you up to this very moment. And because of that amazing grace, we're not taking anything for granted. Let's jump right into the show.
Welcome to another episode here at the Nothing for Granted podcast. Today, whether you're watching via YouTube or here just listening in on the podcast, today we are relaxing. It's super chill. I lost my voice yesterday after writing the new Guardians of the Galaxy Space Rewind, I think is what it's called. I'm not sure what it's called. Time Rewind. Hands down, my favorite ride. So much fun. Clearly, because I lost my voice. But today, we are going to be just hanging out. Just you and I, couple girlfriends, having coffee or whatever it is that you are sipping on this morning. But this is going to be a pretty long episode. And so I wanted to give you guys just different formats that you can digest this information. It's going to be a lot, but it is by far the most requested topic that I receive literally year round, and that is homeschooling. How do I get started homeschooling? Where do I go? What resources do I need? What curriculums do I use? All of the things. So today we're just going to be having coffee, hanging out, just a couple girls enjoying some playtime. All right, let's go ahead and jump right in. If you haven't already subscribed either to the podcast or to my YouTube channel, that's at Sloan the Beast, or the podcast at the Nothing for Granted podcast, please be sure to do so. I post episodes every single Friday where I share with you my top tips on funding. How do you get funding to start or scale your business as a visionary female entrepreneur? I do share lifestyle tips such as productivity. I am a mom of 4 running multiple businesses. And so I know a little bit about being busy, trying to do all the things, trying to juggle all of the hats without dropping everything and causing a mess. So if that is your jam and you are into doing all of this while maintaining a Holy Spirit-led environment, business, life, please join the family. I would love to have you here. All right, so let's go ahead and jump right into one of my favorite topics. So let's begin with, how do you get started, okay? I really like to start with a self-check, because a lot of parents that I talk to about homeschooling, and usually the conversation will come up with my daughter. They'll see my daughter, they'll speak to my daughter, they'll hear about what my daughter has been up to, and they will say, oh my gosh, how are you doing this? And I said, well, we homeschool. Or they'll say things like, well, oh, wow, you didn't go to school today? And we'll, jump into the conversation of, well, we actually homeschool. And then women or men will typically say, well, I could never homeschool. Or they'll ask me, oh, are you a teacher? Is that how you're able to educate your child? And I'm like, no, I'm not a teacher. And so for a lot of women, they enter just the mentality of homeschool from a space of, well, I'm not an educator, I'm not a scholar, I don't have any of the credentials to educate my child. And I then proceed in reminding them that actually humans have been homeschooling or home educating since the beginning of time. This is not a new concept. So in this self-check, I want you to just internalize that. This is not a new thing. You are literally just going back to the basics. Humans have been, parents have been educating, our leaders have been educating our children, our future generations for centuries. And I'm pretty sure that they had no higher education either. So let's start there. The second thing I want you to just be super aware of is your vocabulary. I could never. Get that out of your vocabulary. I want you to think back to all of the things that you had previously said you could never do. What a good feeling was that? So using words like I could never do this or I could never do that, actually, you absolutely can, because it's not about what you are capacitated to do. It really just is, are you willing to get uncomfortable and learn how to do the things that you say you can't do? So I also really just want to remind you that in parenting period, right? But especially as a homeschool mom, I have noticed my kids imitate what I do, what I say. They even mirror the energy that I put out. So I am very conscious of what comes out of my mouth because I don't want my kids to talk that way. When they are stuck on a problem, I don't want them to say, I could never, or I can't, or I don't know how. No, I absolutely can, and I will. And if I don't know, I'll be resourceful and I'll figure it out, period. All right, my final self-check. And of course, these are things that I do for myself, and I know they will help you if you just take the time to also partake in them. So the last thing that I do after my little self-check, how I wrap it all up, is I surrender all of it over to God. If God put this on your heart, it is because He is going to fully deposit everything you need so that you can be successful in this. Okay? Fully. Realistically speaking, guys, who cares more about the growth and the success of your child than you? God, because He has purpose with them, and His purpose in your child's life will come to fruition with or without you. But if He gave them to you, guess what? You probably have a bigger role to play than what you think. And if God has put homeschooling on your heart, it's because He's already given you all of the tools that you need. And so to wrap everything up, I really just start every year with this self-check. I really, really do. I start every year really knowing what my intentionality is behind it. I start every year with just saying, God, this is something that you put in my heart. This is something that you really made me unstill about. And so because you're the one that planted that seed, I need you to water it. I need you to strengthen me. I need you to help me be a better mom, a better wife, a better leader, a better educator. This doesn't happen without you. I cannot educate 4 kids to be successful, independent adults without you. But with you, all things are possible. And so I begin every year with just that acknowledgement that without him in this, it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen because it is hard, but I do hard things. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right into number 1. So how do you get started in homeschooling? The first thing that you will do. Of course, after setting your intentionality. But the first thing you're going to do is you want to check your Department of Education for the requirements. Here in Florida, the state is super flexible. And I actually came across a map. It's by hslda.org. If you're watching on YouTube, it's in the description box down below. If you're listening on the podcast, just check the show notes in the blog. It has everything, all of the resources that I'm going to be mentioning today, everything is going to be on there. So definitely check it out. But this homeschool laws by state page is incredible because it is color coordinated. It has all 50 states, and it basically tells you how rigorous or how high the regulation is state to state. So green is no notice, low regulation. So pretty much it's a free for all, y'all. Or high regulation. So to give you an example, Texas is super low regulation versus New York has some pretty stringent laws. So you can actually click on the state that you reside in and it will tell you everything that you need to know. So it has, for example, I clicked New York at a glance, homeschool law at a glance, options for homeschooling, school required for ages, notification required, yes or no. Teacher qualification, no, just a competent instructor. Assessment requirements, so they actually do have assessment requirements. Immunization requirements, no. State mandated subjects, yes. So you want to take your time looking through this. This is a great resource to begin, okay? This is a great resource to begin. I would not, however, just let myself go off of this resource. I would actually go to the Florida Department of Education for your state and get specifics. If you get confused, and the first year when we moved back from Atlanta, it was the first year that I actually had to report to the state here in Florida. And I just gave them a call. I was like, hey, what do I do? Call them if you have any questions. I had questions when I first moved back, like I mentioned, and I just said, hey, what do I do? Can you guide me through your website so that I can make sure that I have everything I need for me to home educate my child? So here are some keywords that can actually help you because I know that it can be kind of confusing to start. I use keywords like, I did the example of Arizona. So I put AZ, homeschool requirements, Department of Education. Homeschool your state, Department of Education. Home education in your state, requirements. And I also included, like I mentioned, that resource with the hslda.org, which could be a good guiding source. So start there, really understand what is required in your state. So in the state of Florida, all that's required is an evaluation form, and that can be completed by a certified teacher. So, or I can, once she's of age, I can have her take standardized tests, which is a no for me. So we've just had her evaluated for the past, this would be the 3rd year. And it's worked out great for us. I also have to, at the beginning of each school year, provide a letter of intent. Usually they will send me an email and I could just email it right back to them. I've never even had to go down to the Florida education office, nothing like that. Everything is done completely virtual. So go ahead and check those out. Use those keywords to help guide you. Number 2, okay, so once you have figured out, okay, this is what I need, this is where I start, this is what's required in my state, the next thing that you're going to do is actually consider your lifestyle. How are you going to integrate homeschooling into your daily life? Now, one of the things that I have seen become a detriment to other homeschool parents that I've known is they try and accommodate their entire life around homeschooling, okay? And there's nothing wrong with that if that is what you so choose to do. But here's the thing. So if really you started homeschooling as a way to take more family trips and not have to worry about the traditional education schedule, if what you wanted is to give your child a more unconventional or more attentive learning experience, then maybe doing traditional schooling from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. isn't really going to suit your lifestyle, right? So you really want to think, okay, go back to your why. Why did you start homeschooling in the first place? And I want to just take a second here to insert this caveat. I always just forewarn parents, never homeschool from a place of fear. I know that we live in a climate where we're seeing just a ton of really scary things. Okay, let's be honest. Really scary things. However, number one, remember who you serve, okay? No weapon formed against us, okay? We are covered by the blood. God walks before us. He already knows what is going to happen before it even happens. So if he allows anything, it has to work for our good. And sometimes that can be a really hard pill to swallow, especially when it is terrible things that we are seeing in the world. But we have to hold on to God's word and know that to die in Christ is to gain everlasting life with him. So remember that this life really is temporary. We are not from here. So number one, remember who you serve and why we're here. Okay? We can't control what we can't control. Things are going to happen whether your child is at school or whether they're at home. Do not homeschool from a place of fear, because that will be infused in your education and you will start to teach your children from a place of anxiety, and that's not what you want. You want to teach your children from a place of freedom. You want to teach your children from a place of creativity. You want this to flow. And if you are constantly afraid of the can happens, you're not going to be able to do that. So really get to the core of your why and then start thinking about, okay, how can I make homeschool just flow into our lifestyle? I'm going to give my example. So Edward and I first started homeschooling because when we began as a couple, he was a barber. We didn't have any money. I was applying to hospitality gigs. He could not hold a retail job to save his life. I think he worked at Ross for literally 2 days maybe. I don't even think he made it past the first day, actually. He went to take a lunch break and then never came back. Like he cannot work for other people. And so I was like, well, what are we going to do? We have a $500 rent. We have a child on the way. We have no money and no one to help us. No support. And he was like, dang, all I know how to do is cut hair. So guess what he did? I was like, well, gotta do what you gotta do. So he cut hair, and the days were long. I'm talking about my husband was working from 5 a.m. I mean, when we lived in Georgia, even 3, 4 a.m. his days would start, especially in the holiday season. And they wouldn't end until midnight, 1 o'clock at night. And really early on, I was like, hold up. We're not doing this. If we are having a child, then we need to be active in this child's life. Co-participants, you got to help me out. I can't do everything by myself. And so really early on, I knew that we were going to homeschool just because of our lifestyle in the beauty industry. As time has gone on, it's proven that we were spot on. We are both in the beauty industry now, and our life is just insane. There's no way that I would be able to keep up with this drop off, pick up, extracurriculars, schedule, the field trips, the this, the that. I can't do it. We up and go whenever we want to up and go. If we have to have late nights, our kids are right there with us and they're getting the education that they need. And really for us, it was about flexibility. So I started homeschooling my daughter when she was 2.5 years old, just to see, is this something that I feel I can do? And how would I do it? How does she learn? What are things that I need to get better at? And that was the best decision that I made, because it didn't feel forced. It allowed me to learn lessons really early on that now really have helped both of us, because homeschooling really is a collaborative effort between you and your child, and you need to listen more than you talk, okay? When it comes to kids, really listening to what is hindering their ability to really retain the information is going to help you get a lot farther. So going back to considering your lifestyle, what is your lifestyle like? Okay, are you a working parent? Are you a stay-at-home mom? Do you guys travel often? Do you travel at all? And do you have just so many questions, like, do you have the support? What is your lifestyle really like? What is it that you're trying to get out of this? Do you want a traditional setting? Because you don't need it. You really don't need it. And so when you start considering your lifestyle, okay, how can I make this work? So let's do this exercise together, because I think it may help you out. So if I were to begin homeschooling all over again, I would start considering, okay, so my husband leaves at a pretty good time, 8, 9 o'clock. I work on my business, my daughter's business, my husband's business, as well as our academy. So lots of businesses here. And I, of course, want to put my kids in extracurriculars. So let's see, I'm super busy. I'm probably not going to do a traditional school setup. That doesn't fit my lifestyle. What can I do? Okay. So now we're going to start looking into curriculums in a little bit, but just to kind of start tapping into that, would it make more sense for me to have textbooks, or would it make more sense for me to do an online program? Well, how does my child prefer to learn? What's their age? These are all questions that you really you don't need to have the answers to now, but you just want to consider them as you start building out what that's going to look like. I recommend keeping a journal, because it helps me keep myself accountable, helps me keep on track exactly what I want out of this, helps me keep track of the growth that is occurring and go back and see, okay, where were we before? So consider your lifestyle when mapping out what homeschool is going to look like for your family. Number 3 is grow tough skin. I'm not even kidding, guys. I've been homeschooling 7 years at this point, and every single year I get the same question. Are you going to put your child in traditional school this year? It could even be a Christian school. It doesn't matter. No, I'm not. You will get this question all of the time. And if you get triggered every single time, guess what? You can't control what comes out of other people's mouths. You can only control yourself and your reaction. Grow tough skin, push past it. Now it's gotten to the point where my daughter's old enough to where now she's getting asked the question, well, are you going to school next year? And she's like, swerve. No, I'm not. I like being homeschooled. And every single year we ask her, do you want to go to school? Because again, homeschooling is a collaborative effort. And so if she ever voices, yes, I do, then that'll be a different conversation. But up to now, glory to God, we're homeschooling and it's fine. Also, every single time your child acts out, I'm having this problem with my 5-year-old, and he just turned 5, so there's that. But my 5-year-old, every single time he acts out, it's, well, maybe this wouldn't be happening if he was at a traditional school. If he was in school, he would, learn to cope with his emotions better. And I'm like, let's be clear here. A teacher will not teach discipline to my child, because discipline, that starts at home. That starts at home. A teacher cannot teach your child mannerisms, etiquette. No, they can reinforce what's already been taught at home sometimes. But that is not their job. That is not the job of the teacher. That's your job as a parent. But somehow everything that your child does, it's because, well, they're a homeschool kid. So obviously this is why. No, it's not. But these are just some of the comments that we have to incur. I have 4 kids. So of course I get the question, are you going to homeschool all 4 of your kids? Well, that is my intention. Yeah, it is. Absolutely. And there have been times that I've gotten, triggered because I'm human. And I'll say, well, you know what? Since you are so passionate about my child going to even a private school, why don't we do this? Why don't you pay for private school? Why don't you pick them up? Why don't you drop them off? Why don't you help them with all the busy work that they're given? How's that? No? Mind your business. So grow some tough skin. Like I just explained, you will have your moments where it gets annoying, but this is just part of the game. It's part of it. So number 4 is what you all really want to know. This is probably what you came for, and it's the curriculums. How do you know what to teach? Okay. All right, let me get comfortable for this, because there's a lot. So, do you use textbooks? Do you use an online only curriculum? Do you need to get a tablet? What about a school table? How many crafts are too many crafts? Okay. All of these questions, super valid. And I'm going to refer you back to number 1, and that is know your state requirements. Okay, this is why it's so important to start here, because some states, like with the example of New York, they do have requirements on what has to be taught. Other states, like Texas, we saw, is a free-for-all. You do whatever you want. Teach whatever you want. And with that, I do want to say there are different types of homeschooling. Yeah, like different types of homeschooling. So there is traditional schooling, which is like a normal school day. Okay, so what, 8 to 3? I don't even know if that's right, but just your normal school day. Then you have unschooling, which is basically you are led by your lessons are led by the interests of your child. It is very loose, and you just kind of go with the flow. It's very much curiosity led. It's a very creative form of learning. Then there's world schooling, which I love. It's that world schooling is huge for digital nomads. It's huge for missionaries. And basically it's just that. You're learning through travel. You're learning through just world experiences. In my case, that is really what I would consider our family is a mixture of like unschoolers and world schoolers. We are definitely very flexible in the way that we educate our kids. So I would say those are like the 3 main types. There's a ton out there. But when it comes to curriculums, you will fall into one of those categories more or less. Now, getting to these questions, okay, you'll start with what's required in your state. And then from there, you're going to start breaking down what makes sense for your family. So here in Florida, we don't really have any like requirements like that. So I actually just am led by age milestones. We don't use a grade curriculum, or a grade system necessarily. I'm just led by her age. So she's 9 right now. Whatever a 9-year-old needs to know, whether that falls into 3rd, 4th, or 5th grade, that's kind of what I run by. And so I've included some resources again down below, where if you want to use the milestone system, I super recommend it. It's not as strict as maybe going off of like state requirements for let's say Florida. And I do that because I don't want to get in my head about, oh my gosh, she didn't learn this, or oh my gosh, she didn't get that, or I didn't teach that. Kids learn so much more than you realize. They are literally learning every second of every day from everyone. And just being open to that will make your process so much more enjoyable. So some of the milestones that I really look at is what growth areas, the milestones that I use, I kind of categorize by growth areas. So for example, speech and vocabulary, etiquette and mannerisms, emotional capability. I look at critical thinking. Of course, there's 2 subjects that I really hone in on, and that is, of course, like reading, writing. Those are huge for me, and it's because as a funding expert, I'm writing grants all day. I love to read. I love to write. And so these are topics that are important to me. And that's, hopefully topics that are important to her. And that's foundational. Like if you can't read or write, you're going to have a hard time. And then of course, math. So why I chose these areas, especially in the past year as she has launched her business, is because if you can't read, you won't be able to know whether a contract or collaboration is going to be the best fit for you. If you don't know math, how do you know that your investment in specific products, in specific events, how do you know that they made sense? You won't, right? So math is super important, knowing how to price yourself, all of those things. But again, I go back to, she already knows that she is a business owner and she doesn't want to work for anyone and she wants to have multiple businesses. So if this is her goal, how can I, as her educator, as her parent, support that so that she has optimal growth throughout the years? So that's really the categories that I look at. Going back to curriculum, when it comes to textbooks, when it comes to textbooks versus online, you have a ton of options. When it comes to textbooks, you can choose whatever textbooks your state is using, or you can go online and do some research. This is very much trial and error. So textbooks or curriculums are very much trial and error. Be prepared to change it up often. All of the time, I'm changing up what we're using, and it's because sometimes you think that something will work for your child and it doesn't. Or sometimes you think you are going to like a particular just format or a particular lesson, and you don't. So there's that. Just to give you an example, you can research online, and I can do a completely separate video on curriculums because there is a lot that goes into it. But 1, I would go back to your state requirements. 2, I would go back to what is your lifestyle like, what is going to make the most sense for you. No, you don't need a textbook for every single subject. No, you don't need a curriculum for every single subject. But again, that really depends on what type of homeschool family do you want to be. There are a ton of resources on Teachers Pay Teachers. There are faith-based. There are secular or non-faith-based textbooks out there. Literally for any type of learning that you want to offer your child, there's a curriculum for that. So there are whole curriculums that include all of the subjects, and then there are ones that are kind of broken down. The way that I create curriculums is, again, super relaxed. I really just take it back to what are our goals with homeschooling, which really is to raise lifelong learners. Continuing. So the way that I set up curriculums are super relaxed. I really just take it back to what are our goals, which again is just to raise lifelong learners. I take it back to what is our lifestyle. This is why I put those at the forefront of this list. It's because really everything it built on itself. So for me this year, we have used a mixture of not really textbooks, but kind of virtual resources and just worksheets and packets that I have printed from local moms and other educators that have created online resources that I wanted to support. And that has been really helpful. And then, of course, I have come up with things on my own, just based off of what I saw my children were interested in, what I felt like they were, just not even capacitated, just like things that would challenge them. Because I think that capacity, you can do that. You can up your capacity if you are willing to, again, step out of your discomfort, if you're willing to learn new things. And really that's what I try and do with my kids, is just challenge them as much as I can and really set the bar high for them. So when I start to map out my curriculum, those are the things that I look for. I also want to mention that you don't need to start and finish a textbook. I think oftentimes we get in our heads that we paid all this money for this textbook. This textbook is supposed to teach them all of these amazing things, and it will eventually. There's textbooks that I've gone back and used that I didn't finish the school year maybe prior, but I will maybe reuse it halfway through the new school year. So that's the cool part about it, is you can overlap, you can really just make it work for you and for your children. So some of the things that I have used religiously through 2022 in my homeschooling is how to teach your child to read in 100 easy lessons. I've been using that for my 5-year-olds, and it is incredible. I have purchased, I'll link them down below because I don't have them on me right now, but I've purchased books from Target that is for like kindergarten, that has all of the subjects, the ABCs, your numbers, comparisons, like just everything you need, almost like a full curriculum book. That's really easy for him to do. And I like that because it works on his handwriting. It works on his attention because he has zero attention when it comes to homeschooling. Actually, my 3-year-old will do my 5-year-old's homework. So if that doesn't show you how different kids are when it comes to learning, hopefully that gives you some insight. I did purchase my daughter it's like a computer tablet situation. It's the Gateway 11.6 inch computer. We actually, a little backstory on this. So we actually had her save her own money, and we did that because she had been using our old iPad, but did not take care of it. And so in an effort to teach her responsibility, we had her save her money and then buy the computer. So she's taking great care of that computer now, right? Because it came out of her pocket. So that is the computer that we use, and she has been writing her essays on there. We use Khan Academy. Love Khan Academy. It's free. It is super comprehensible for her, so it's really easy for her to keep up with her own progress as well. And she's really great about independent learning. I did a poll, I don't remember how long ago, on my Instagram stories, and I asked what other options were out there for math. She was really struggling with multiplications, and you guys gave me some amazing resources that we have been using for the latter half of this year, and it is ISL and quizzes, which has been amazing. I saw my daughter go from doing 50% on a test on quiz to literally her final, she just got 100. And that was in multiplication, which she was really struggling with. And she got 100 on that. Like, it's the growth was just, it was evident. So that was really fun. I use kinesthetic sand. We love kinesthetic sand. It is easy for cleanup. Literally just vacuum it up. We don't use slime or anything like that, but I like it because it is creative learning. It helps with the motor skills. My 3-year-old will play with kinesthetic sand and has for like 3 hours straight, just quietly there building things. And that was scary because he is like our wild child. So kinesthetic sand, highly, highly, highly recommend. Don't care what age they are. All 4 of our kids will sit at the table and just play for hours. And I don't really like giving technology to my younger kids, but I did get my 5-year-old a Amazon Fire 8 tablet. And I did that only for the days that he was, for example, at his grandma's house where they do watch a lot of TV. And I wanted him to have something educational to keep up with. And so he does have a tablet, and I downloaded a bunch of like educational books and programs and all the things. And then, like I mentioned, there are packets like for punctuation. There's packets for like sciences that I printed out from just other creators in the home education space that I really loved, and I will link those down below as well. So as you can see, my curriculum is super chill. It is very relaxed. It is very low key. Oh, I forgot to add books. Okay, so for books, we're really bad about returning books to the library. I know everyone's like, well, you know, virtual books are the thing. Not for me. I need to hold a book. I like to hear the pages turn. I like to feel the page as I'm like following along. I'm super old school. We're no good about returning books to the library every 2 weeks anyways. So no, we don't do that. We go to Goodwill and I let them choose a book that they want. And for me, the way that I see thrifting is pretty much just like rent. Like it's rented, because once I'm done with it, I just give it back. So let's say we had, like we just did a purge a couple weeks ago. So if my daughter paid 50 cents for this book that she's had for the past year, well then that book was on loan for 50 cents and now we're just returning it. Like that's the way that I have learned to see things, especially as my minimalist journey has evolved. So if you are no good about returning things to the library and you want to stop racking up these crazy bills, I super recommend the Goodwill book section. You can travel to a couple different ones and pick up a number of books. I read 1 book per month. That is my goal for 2022. For my daughter, it takes her a little bit longer, and that's fine as long as she is reading. And I do have a standard for her of at least 10 to 20 pages is what I require from her a day. Of course, she usually will go towards the 10 pages because, you know, she's a child. But there are days that if she really loves the book, she'll push for those 20 pages, and she does really well. So that gives you a little bit of insight on how I create my curriculums. And again, as you can tell, super relaxed. I do not get in my head about this at all. My 5th kind of tip thing I want you to consider is support. Okay, so I want you to think about, are you a single mom? Are you working mom? Are you going to school? Are you homeschooling one child or many children? These are all things that will impact how much support you have. And I really think that when you do this, you have to be realistic with yourself. I've seen a lot of moms that get really upset because their husbands aren't as active as they would like with homeschooling. And I just, I'm honest. what was the expectation that was set to begin with? Like, was this a conversation that you had with your husband, or was this a decision that you made on your own and your husband was just like, yeah, whatever? If you are in partnership with anyone in raising your children, it does take a tribe. And I 100% recommend that if this is a decision that you're making, for you to sit down and get real with your spouse. Are we both on the same page on this? If not, how can we be on the same page? How much are you willing to support me? What is the expectation that we're setting? What are the goals that we want for our children? Again, this is a collaborative effort, and you need to be real about what kind of support you're about to receive, because you're going to need it. So I'm going to get a little bit personal here, and I love my husband. I want to be clear. I love my husband. He is an incredible father. He's a really hands-on father, but I homeschool. And over the past few years, he's gotten really good about that. He's like, yeah, no, my wife homeschools. Like, this is her jam. This is her thing. I really don't do very much. With that being said, I refuse to make excuses for him. I won't be that person. I have an expectation, and there have been instances where, yeah, I have to hold into that expectation. One example of this is one that may or may not surprise you guys, especially if you follow me on Instagram again. But it's the reason why my daughter is a nail tech at 9 years old. So my husband actually, he is at a beauty school, and when it got to the point where I started to homeschool my 5-year-old, I was like, okay, I can't do this. I was just, really starting to ease him into it. I had relaunched my business, and there was just a lot of transitions that were happening, and I was like, I cannot do this. I just had a baby, and I was like, I can't do this. You need to help me out, because I'm not putting my daughter in a regular school because you refuse to do your part. So I noticed that she's not allowed to do her nails, but she was really into other people's nails and just was really creative. So what I would do is I would print out pages for her of like hands and nails and just let her draw her own little nail designs and things. And he's like, well, she seems to have an interest in this. Let's just put her in the program. And because his mom is the owner of that beauty school, we were able to do that, no issues. And yeah, so she got into the nail program as a way to get Edward to help me. And that really helped with her homeschool and really catapulted her to be who she is today, because it helped with her Spanish. The class was totally in Spanish. It helped with her motor skills, her creativity. It ticked off the science box, because that's all science. And so many things were accomplished through that. Now, notice how we had to get creative, okay? I had to get creative with my spouse, and more than likely you will too. I had to think back to, okay, what is he already doing? What is not going to be an inconvenience for him? What is something that is effortless for him and natural, and something that he feels like he is able to do? And you will more than likely have to ask yourself the same question. What is an area that your spouse or your partner is knowledgeable about? What's something that they enjoy? What's something that comes natural to them that will not be too much of an inconvenience, that will enable them to support you in homeschooling your child better? And again, just be honest with yourself, be honest with them, have them be honest with you, because I think sometimes our spouses just don't want to let us down. So they'll say whatever we want to hear, and that's not what we need. We need honesty. We need open communication so that we can reach this goal of educating independent humans, right? So support is huge, okay? And again, it does take a community. The last tip, the last resource I want to provide you with is community. Even with the numbers, and you can look them up, numbers in homeschooling has gone up, increased drastically. And it's no surprise, right? We have COVID, we have school shootings, we have bullying and increased child and teenage suicide. I mean, the list literally does not stop. And again, parents are choosing to home educate more and more. I also feel like the rise in entrepreneurship has had a huge impact on the increase in homeschooling, because I think more parents are realizing that the school system does not necessarily cater to just long-term growth for children who pretty much already know that they're going to be entrepreneurs. I think that this is something that you can see really early on, and we need to nurture that. So without going on too much of a tangent here, community is super important. Even with the rise in those numbers, it can be very lonely. It can be exciting when you run into somebody who homeschools as well. And every homeschool family is vastly different. So how do you begin homeschooling, and how do you do this in a way that doesn't feel isolating? So there's co-ops, there's umbrella programs, there's clubs, there's conferences, there's online communities, there's meetups, there's so many options that you really just have to look up. I have never been a part of a co-op. Honestly, I just haven't really found one that made very much sense to me. I know that a lot of people use co-ops as a way to, again, build community, get their child socialized. They're great if you're struggling to teach your child one subject. There are some that will have another parent or someone come in to teach your child that. It's a great way to, take them on field trips. Umbrella programs are basically just when you are homeschooling your kid, but you're under a school. And sometimes that will be a great option if you want to get your kids involved in clubs or sometimes sports. It really just depends on what that school allows for. And then, of course, clubs and conferences and online communities have probably been my favorite right now. I'm not a part of any really on Instagram or anything like that. I don't really follow a ton of homeschool parents. But on Facebook, I am a part of a couple of homeschool groups, and I really enjoy them. I really enjoy them because it's a way for me to stay in the loop on any potential violations to our homeschooling rights. This is one thing that you really have to look out for. And again, this can be a totally different episode, but just making sure that you're aware of what your rights are as a homeschool parent and how to identify whether or not those rights are being endangered. And these groups are great for that. They're great for upcoming events. They're great for finding creative ways to teach a subject. If you have any questions on curriculum, sometimes they'll have curriculum sales on there. And it's a great way for you to feel related to. Like I said, this is a journey. It's an evolution, and what you're taking on, it's not something that should be taken lightly, but you shouldn't be so hard on yourself either. And so for me, it has been really enjoyable and really a game changer when I am struggling with something, when I'm wondering, what am I doing wrong as a parent? You have other parents that are in the same boat as you. And sometimes that's all you need to hear is, girl, I'm right there with you. And, I think that oftentimes people see what my daughter looks like right now, because I don't know what she's going to look like in a couple years. But right now, she's like the epitome of what you would want your child to be at 9 years old, right? She's smart and she's sassy and she's just so amazing. She really blows me out of the water. And a lot of people will come to me and they'll say, wow, you're doing such a great job. But what they don't see is the nights that, oh my God, I'm getting emotional. What you don't see is the nights that you go to sleep and you wonder if you're doing it right. They don't see the nights that you wonder, is she going to turn around and say, man, I wish I would have gone to regular school instead. You wonder, is she going to hold her own when it's all said and done? Am I making the right decision? There's so much weight that comes into this, and that can be hard. And that's why you need community. That's why you need support, because this is hard. It's hard. But again, my number one affirmation this year has been, I do hard things. I do hard things. And so having a community where they can say, I'm here, I hear you, I'm going through the same thing as you are, it's like a breath of fresh air. And so I really encourage you to get connected. You are more than free to send me a DM at any time if you have any questions regarding homeschooling. If you are feeling isolated, if you feel like you can't figure this out, what do I do? My kid just is not retaining this information. Guys, that takes time. And in the most incredible ways, they will surprise you. People will come up to you as soon as they hear that you homeschool, and they will quiz your children. And you're like, oh my God, they didn't know this. I'm such a bad parent. No. First of all, shame on them for trying to quiz your child, because just because you're a doctor, right, doesn't mean that it gives people the right to ask you, I don't know, a medical question out of nowhere. Like, what's the cure for leukemia? Like, no, we don't do that in regular life. Why do we do that to homeschool kids? Because you're making them feel inferior and you make the parent feel lesser than. So, okay, sorry. But yeah, I wanted to make this episode because I know that it's a lot, and I have had to learn through a lot of trial and error and a lot of research, and I wanted to provide you guys one space where you can get all of the information that you need. If you want me to make a part 2 to this video, please let me know. If this was encouraging for you, if it was resourceful for you, please be sure to leave a rating and review on the podcast or on this video, as it helps me out a ton so that I can reach more people. And be sure to check out the blog or your show notes so that you know of all of the resources that I mentioned and some more. And guys, I hope you have a blessed rest of your day. Thank you so much for being here.